tractor manufacturers do not design their equipment to work in the woods. They design them to work like this in a field, right? But you buy this tractor, you want to increase the amount of land you have or their yard. You want to clear a spot to build a house. You want to be putting a grapple on this, using it in and around the woods. It needs better protection. So that's where we come in. So this is our fuel tank cover. This cover mounts up here at the step. It'll also mount to the bottom to where our skid plate is. We make a full skid plate for the bottom of this tractor. This cover comes around the back side, bottom side, and front side for protection. We're going to start off with the fuel tank cover. So I'll get the hardware out and the tools, and I'll let you know what tools we're using as we're using them. And in the description, there'll be a list of all the tools we use for this. So this is 3 pieces. It used to be 2 pieces, but now we've changed a few things around. It's now a 3-piece design. You will have a bag of hardware that comes in the box. Since these items came right out of the shop and didn't come out of a box, we're just using some of our bulk supplies because we're going to be using a bunch of this hardware in this video. So you have a top piece, kind of a middle piece, and then your base. So this is how these are going to get assembled. And we'll just run through and get the bolts in, and we'll go ahead and get those in and tighten down. And then these 3 bolts here will line up with the step bolts on the tractor. So once we get this all assembled, we'll go ahead and we'll pull the step off of the tractor, and then I'll show you kind of how I like to line all this up and get those bolts back in, because it can be a little bit of a pain. So these bolts can go either outside in or inside out. It doesn't matter. I personally like the aesthetics of the outside in, so that's how I'm going to install it. But if you wanted to install it the other way, you are more than welcome to do so. Since it'll probably be a little bit boring to watch me sit here and install all of these bolts, we'll keep the camera rolling, but we're going to go ahead and speed this up so you don't have to painfully watch me put in every single one of these bolts. Now that the bottom is installed, these 2 pieces are fully bolted together. We're going to repeat the same exact process just with the top part of this. Now this fuel tank cover is fully assembled. Now it's all one big piece. Now these holes down here on the bottom, there's going to be 2 of them, right here and right here. If you do not have our skid plate, those holes are not going to go to anything. So they're designed to integrate in with the skid plate. Just know that if you do have a backhoe, you cannot run the skid plate and the backhoe at the same time, unfortunately. The 2 of them just don't play nice together. And we're gonna install this cover. Right before we install it, what I'll do is I'll kind of walk you through how we install the skid plate, because the skid plate would be the first item going in if it was going on this tractor. So you need to do the skid plate before you do the fuel tank cover. All right, so we're over here at the fuel tank. We're going to pull this step off and get this out of our way. Once we get that out of our way, we'll be able to see in there a little bit better. And I'll also be able to show you how the skid plate goes in. But this is a 14mm socket. And I put this on a long extension. It makes it substantially easier to use. With our step off and out of the way, I'm going to take a second just to talk you through the skid plate install. So the skid plates slide in between the tires in here, and they go below this fuel tank support, but they go up on top of these loader framing supports. So you put the rear skid plate in first. It's marked rear right in the skid plate. It's cut right out of it. So you'll slide that in, and you want to make sure that when you're laying underneath the tractor looking at it, you can read the word rear. So there's some welded nuts. Those nuts will go on the top side of the skid plate, not down on the bottom. So the rear skid plate's going to slide into the front position, and then you'll slide the skid plate back on top of this tubing, and then you'll slide the front skid plate in front of it. Once you have the skid plates in, you can get the hangers or the Z brackets that we have to actually secure the skid plate in place. Throw those on it, get your bolts started, just don't tighten anything down. You'll want to wait until you get both your side covers on, then you have a little bit of room to kind of move things around and get it all lined up and drop together. So that's how the skid plate goes in. It's really simple. It's really not a big deal, and it only takes about 10 minutes to put it in or take it out. Now the fuel tank cover, now that we have this, so it's a little tricky kind of holding this because it's heavy, holding this up in place also while trying to put the step back on. So the way that I like to do it is I'll sit on the ground, I'll slide on here underneath here a little bit more, and I'm going to use my knees underneath this fuel tank cover to help hold it up in the air for me to get those bolts started in. So the cover will hang there while you get situated, which is very nice. And I'm going to take out 2 of these bolts and we'll put those in after. So now I usually have a little trick where I'll use a piece of cardboard or a piece of paper, and I'll shove it in my socket to prevent this bolt from going all the way in there, just to get just a little bit more thread engagement available on this. But I don't think I have anything. What do we got there? Oh, we got one? Perfect. He brought one that's already been shoved full of cardboard. So we're going to swap out this socket for my cardboard loaded socket. And all that that's going to do is it stops this bolt from sliding down in there all of the way. So when you push it into the socket, it just will go essentially to the end of the nut and not go down, or the end of the hex head and not go down all the way. And that'll help when it comes to trying to reach those threads with all of these pieces that you're holding on to. I'm going to take a little bit out of there. Or alternatively, stick your cardboard out the side, and then when you put the bolt in there, it'll be tight and it'll likely not fall. So we'll set this up, make sure this is the correct direction. We'll get this up and into place. And kind of all at the same time, I'm going to use my knee and this, and I'm going to go for the center. So we'll get that to slide in. And I can feel that we're into the threads. So once that one's started, I'm going to get the other one started. So the step's got to move a little bit that way, and the fuel tank cover's got to go. There we go. Now this fuel tank cover is slotted. So these mounting bolts up here are slotted. And the reason is TYM changed a few things between their early model 24s and their late model 24 tractors. And it requires a little bit of adjustability in order to fit. So the torque spec on these bolts, let's talk about that for a minute. So TYM does not give you a torque spec for these bolts. And if you call them and ask, what they'll tell you to do is to find what the bolt is and then reference the generic spec of that bolt. In this case, with these bolts, it is 50 foot-pounds. So you won't find that in your manual, but I talked with one of the dealers we work with, and that was their recommendation, was to use the spec for the bolt itself. So 50 foot-pounds on these. Once you get everything in, your step is good and solid. This cover is then in place and is nice and solid. And you've got your protection from the front, obviously the side, the bottom, and then this protection here in the back, so this tire can't throw things into that fuel tank. Thanks for checking it out, and if you have any questions, you can give us a call, 315-335-5421. Thanks.